Let's say we have a situation where we have two pieces of clothing and one of them is lying on top of the other. And instead of having a crisp folding, we have something like this, where we have something that looks like almost like a tube. We can see through it. If we want this folding to be crisp, there's a tool for that. It's called press, and it's right at the top of the window. If we click here, we should now click one of those garments that we have, and as you can see, once we click, the first one disappears, and then we need to click on the other one. There's going to be a little bit of highlighting of the seam, indicating that this operation is taking place. And then if we simulate, you can see that the folding is much crisper, and the amount of this crispness, of the sharpness, will depend on the material. It will depend on the particle distance that we set for the garments. But overall, this is a much better result, and this is sometimes this is desirable result. The thing about the press tool, though, is that it's not exactly a tool as such. Instead, it's an automated set of commands that we can do manually inside of Marvelous. And this becomes obvious when we decide to remove this press, because there is no tool to do that. We can't go into the press and somehow right click or do something else to choose delete press. It simply doesn't work this way. What happens instead is that the seam is now a different type, and let me explain what I mean by that. If we go into editing, edit seam tool, and press on the seam, in here we can see apart from all the other options, we have the first one, which is called sewing line type, and this one is set to turned. If we click on any other seams, if we had in the scene, and we can create it real quick, and we click on those on the seams, we can see that the sewing line type is set to custom angle, and the fold angle is set to 180. It means that it's completely neutral. But if we go back into the seam that we pressed, it's set to turned. This is basically what this tool does. It automatically goes into the seam property and changes the sewing line type, and that's it. So if for some reason we don't want this effect to take place no longer, we can go into the edit seam tool, select right seam, and in here we choose custom angle, and the settings go to the default settings, meaning that fold angle is set to 180, and that means that there will be no deformation taking place. This seam is going to be invisible. If you enjoy this content or find it useful, please consider supporting me by buying me a cup of coffee via the link in the description. The press tool has a bit of a side effect, and sometimes this could be very beneficial. It can create a very nice looking seam where we want. To illustrate this, I'm going to use our model, our avatar, and here I'm going to go into the press tool and select those two pieces. Again, the seam is highlighted. It flashes a few times, meaning that the press was activated. And if we simulate, this is what's going to happen. And as you can see now, there's just a gap, and the reason for that is because for this effect to take place, we need to go into the double-sided or thick textured surface. Once we click that, we see the effect taking place. And if we compare what we have here and what we have here, we can see that the difference is quite obvious, and it's quite drastic. And again, perhaps not in this case, but in many cases, this could be a very desirable effect. To illustrate it a little bit further, this is a screenshot from ZBrush, and as you can see, there's a very clear indication of where the seam is. There's a nice roundness between those two patterns, whereas everything else, where the seams are in Marvelous, and we can see it here in the middle of the back, we have it the same symmetrical seam on the other side. But on the actual geometry, there's absolutely nothing. The surface is completely flat. There are no seams that are visible to us. So this is a really nice tool to get something like this, where you want your seams to be visible, or perhaps you don't want to add anything, any extra work on top of the simulation that took place in Marvelous. One little thing to note is that for this effect to be visible in, let's say, ZBrush or any other application, after we export the model from Marvelous, we need to make sure that we have the geometry exported as thick instead of thin. So if we export it as thick, there will be double-sided surface, and the seam effect will take place.